My best friend betrayed me for a more profitable project. He thought I would go bankrupt, but he was wrong. I got my revenge on him. And then I've always been meticulous about my finances. Every dollar Olivia and I earned, we saved or invested carefully. For years, we've been working towards a goal: financial independence. It wasn't about getting rich quickly. It was about building something solid, something that would give us security in the future. I'm a data analyst by trade, so everything I do has to make sense in numbers. No rash decisions, no spur of the moment risks. Olivia, on the other hand, is more of a visionary. She runs her own online business, constantly spotting trends and capitalizing on them. However, she acknowledges the need for caution when it comes to significant investments. After years of careful observation and financial preparation, we were poised to make a significant investment. Real estate had been on our radar for some time, as property values tend to appreciate over time, and with the right investment, we could secure a comfortable future. I had conducted extensive research, analyzed market trends, and identified potential opportunities. We were simply awaiting the optimal moment to act. The opportunity presented itself when our friends Noah and Emma introduced us to a real estate development located just outside the city. This ambitious project, with plans for a sprawling suburban community, was seeking investors, and the potential returns were highly promising. It was a rare opportunity that doesn't come around often. Noah and Emma found themselves in a similar financial situation, with stable incomes but a desire to increase their savings. Noah, an engineer known for his methodical and practical approach, shared a vision with me that was echoed by Emma, a cautious schoolteacher. When Noah proposed pooling our resources to invest in the project, it seemed like a logical step. With our combined capital, we could make a bigger impact and potentially see even greater returns. I reviewed the project thoroughly. The numbers were solid, the development was in a prime location, and the market was trending in the right direction. The developers had a good reputation, and everything checked out. Olivia was excited about the prospect too. She saw the potential in the project immediately, and I could tell she was ready to dive in. I wasn't as quick to jump, but the numbers didn't lie. It was a sound investment. Following several discussions with Noah and Emma, we decided to proceed. We engaged with the developers, examined the contract, and outlined the terms of our joint investment. One clause, however, raised concerns. It stipulated that if either party decided to withdraw before the project's completion, they could do so, but it would come with a significant penalty, not just for the withdrawing party, but also for the other party. This was intended to ensure commitment, but it introduced an element of risk that I was not entirely comfortable with. Nevertheless, Noah and Emma were confident, and Olivia was eager to begin. After careful consideration of the risks, it seemed like the right decision. We signed the contract and officially embarked on the investment together. For the initial few months, the project progressed without any issues, meeting our expectations, and our interactions with the developers were positive. Olivia and I maintained close communication with Noah and Emma, regularly discussing updates and making decisions as a team. It felt like everything was falling into place. The developers kept us updated on the progress of the construction. The reports were promising. We all felt confident that we'd made the right choice. Our investment was growing, and while there were always risks in real estate, it seemed like the market was holding steady. I tracked the numbers daily, monitoring the property values in the surrounding area and keeping a close eye on any potential threats to the project's success. The initial stability was maintained, but the market dynamics began to shift. Initially, there was a subtle decline in property values in the area, accompanied by rumors of a competing development nearby. Despite this, I remained calm, understanding that real estate markets naturally fluctuate and temporary dips are not a cause for immediate withdrawal. I closely monitored the situation, believing that the market would eventually self-correct. However, as weeks passed, the situation became increasingly worrying. The competing development project was officially confirmed, located just a few miles away. It was larger, backed by a more prominent developer, and was diverting attention from our investment. Noah and I began to have more frequent discussions about our investment strategy. He was more alarmed than I was, suggesting that we consider selling off part of our investment to mitigate the risk. I was not convinced that selling in a down market was always a losing strategy. I believed we should hold firm and wait for the market to rebound. Olivia agreed with me, and for a while Noah went along with our plan. However, as the market continued to weaken, Noah's concerns grew, and he started to talk more seriously about withdrawing altogether, taking the penalty and cutting his losses before things got worse. I disagreed. I knew that if we held out, we could recover. Real estate was a long-term game, and I wasn't ready to throw in the towel because of a temporary setback. The tension between Noah and me began to escalate. Each meeting turned into a contentious debate about our next steps. Olivia and Emma attempted to remain neutral, but it was evident that the situation was straining our friendship. What had initially been a shared aspiration was now causing stress and frustration. Following our initial discussion, Olivia, myself, along with Noah and Emma, found ourselves seated in a modern conference room across from the developers. The project was laid out before us, a sprawling suburban community just outside the city. The developers had ambitious plans, promising parks, schools, and shopping centers that would attract young families and professionals seeking to escape the crowded urban environment. It was the type of development that seemed primed for success, especially in a market like ours, where housing demand continued to grow. The developer's presentation was comprehensive, showcasing blueprints, financial forecasts, and detailed timelines for each project phase. Based on their data, the investment return appeared promising, with forecasts indicating consistent growth over the next few years. As a data analyst, I valued the level of detail provided. The numbers were favorable, and while risks were acknowledged, they seemed manageable. I would not invest without a thorough understanding of potential gains and risks, and this project met most of my criteria. Noah, as an engineer, approached the project with a similar analytical mindset as I did. He inquired about the construction schedule, materials, and logistics, whereas I concentrated on the financial aspects, including cost overruns, market fluctuations, and the projected return rates. We meticulously examined every detail. By the end of the day, it was evident that this was the right opportunity for us to proceed. However, one aspect of the contract raised concerns. A specific clause outlined the consequences if a family decided to withdraw from the project before completion. According to the agreement, if either party withdrew, it would not only affect their portion of the investment, but also incur a significant penalty for the other party. The penalty was designed to discourage any rash decisions and ensure that all parties remained committed for the long haul. While I understood the rationale behind it, it added an element of risk that was not entirely comfortable for me. Despite my reservations, we proceeded with the project. Noah and I signed the contract, formalizing our partnership in the project. The paperwork was completed, and we were officially in. Our families had entered into a joint investment that could potentially secure our financial futures. The developers wasted no time getting started, and for the first few months, things moved smoothly. Every few weeks, we would meet with the developers to discuss progress, review any updates, and make decisions on minor adjustments that needed to be made. The initial stages of the project were executed as planned. The land was cleared, infrastructure was established, and construction commenced on the initial homes. Developers' reports were consistently positive, and the local real estate market remained robust. There were no discernible signs of impending issues. With each update, our confidence in the project's trajectory grew. Over time, our interactions with the developers became more routine. We reviewed progress reports, approved necessary expenses, and discussed upcoming milestones. I closely monitored market trends, and Olivia and I regularly analyzed our investment performance. Noah and Emma were equally involved, and we all felt that we had made a good decision by partnering up. However, as with any investment, there are always variables that cannot be predicted. The initial signs of potential issues emerged several months into the project. Initially, there was a slight decrease in property values in the vicinity. Although this was a minor fluctuation, it prompted concern. The decline in property values coincided with the announcement of another development project located a few miles away. This competing project was significantly larger and supported by a more prominent developer, which had the potential to affect the demand for homes in our area. I promptly began monitoring the situation closely. Market fluctuations are not uncommon. Initially, I was not overly concerned. The real estate market is known for its volatility, and I believe that the initial drop in property values was a temporary anomaly. However, as weeks passed, the decline in property values persisted. The competing project began to garner attention, and it became evident that it was diverting potential buyers from our development. During our regular meetings with Noah and Emma, we delved into the situation in detail. We analyzed market data, reviewed developer reports, and debated the best course of action. Noah and I had differing perspectives on how to proceed. Noah was more concerned about the potential long-term impact of the market shift, while I remained confident that we could weather the temporary downturn. I believe that selling off a portion of our investment too soon would lock us into a loss. In contrast, waiting for the market to rebound would allow us to recover any potential losses. Over time, the tension between our differing approaches escalated. Noah expressed growing concern about the market's continued decline and proposed selling a portion of our investment to reduce risk. I disagreed, believing that selling in a down market was almost always a losing strategy. I advocated for holding our position and awaiting market correction. Olivia and Emma remained supportive but took a more passive role in the discussions, deferring decision-making to Noah and me. Their anxiety increased as the situation unfolded. Each meeting concluded with more questions than answers, and the uncertainty surrounding the project began to weigh heavily on all of us, including the developers. Continued to assure us that the project was on track, construction was progressing as planned, and they believed that the market would stabilize by the time the homes were completed. Despite the market fluctuations, the demand for housing in the area remained relatively strong, and they were confident that the project would attract buyers. However, once the first phase was completed, their optimism did little to alleviate the growing concerns. As the months passed, the market continued to fluctuate, and the competing development garnered more attention. The once simple investment had become increasingly complex. Noah and I continued to debate the best course of action, but no clear solution emerged. The clause in the contract that had initially seemed inconsequential now loomed as a constant reminder of the risks we had taken. We were committed to the project, and early withdrawal would result in significant financial losses for both families. The realization of this burden influenced every decision we made, and it became evident that our partnership was facing its first significant challenge. The initial smooth progress of the project had given way to uncertainty and doubt. While the project continued to progress, the cracks in our joint investment began to surface. As the project progressed, the disagreements between Noah and me became more frequent. What had initially been minor differences in perspective had escalated into a series of tense discussions. Noah's increasing concern about the market shifts and potential financial repercussions led him to reevaluate the situation frequently, eventually transforming his concern into a desire to mitigate risk, even at the cost of prematurely withdrawing from the project. Conversely, I remained steadfast in my belief that our best course of action was to persevere, convinced that patience would eventually lead to recovery. Despite the ongoing market fluctuations, I viewed the temporary setbacks as mere obstacles. I had faith that the real estate market would stabilize over time and that the project would ultimately succeed if we held on long enough. I was not prepared to abandon an investment with such potential. To me, real estate was a long-term endeavor, and selling off prematurely would only lock in our losses. However, Noah viewed the situation differently. He perceived it as increasingly unstable and believed that if we did not act promptly, the losses would only escalate. Tensions between us escalated during our meetings with the developers. Noah began to question the project's timeline more aggressively and raise concerns about potential delays. He also grew more vocal about his fears regarding the competing development, which continued to attract attention and potentially divert buyers away from our project. His anxiety about the situation was palpable, and it became clear that his confidence in the investment was eroding. During a particularly tense meeting, Noah proposed that we should withdraw from the project. His reasoning was that taking a smaller loss now would be preferable to risking a larger one in the future. He believed that the market was trending in the wrong direction, and delaying our decision could lead to further losses. I strongly disagreed, arguing that we should remain committed to the investment. I believed that exiting prematurely would be a hasty decision that would result in unnecessary losses. The clause in our contract stipulated that early withdrawal would not only incur penalties for both of our families, but would also lock in a loss that we might otherwise recover from if we were patient. Despite my persistent efforts to persuade him, Noah remained steadfast in his stance. He was unwilling to jeopardize his family's financial security on what he perceived as a failing venture. As our discussions progressed, our positions hardened, with me emphasizing the potential for long-term success and Noah focusing on the immediate risks. Following the meeting, the tension between our families became more pronounced. Conversations with Noah and Emma became shorter and more formal, and there was a noticeable distance forming between us. What had once been a close friendship, built on trust and shared goals, was beginning to unravel under the weight of the investment. Noah and Emma started to pull away, not just in their involvement with the project, but also socially. Meetings that had once been filled with easy conversation now felt tense and awkward, and the growing frustration was evident. The disagreements about the project extended to other aspects of our relationship. Minor discussions about the investment escalated into more intense debates. Noah and I were no longer aligned, and it became evident that we were diverging. His insistence on exiting the investment conflicted with my resolve to persist, leaving no room for compromise. The partnership, which had begun with such promise, was now under considerable stress. Noah and Emma began to distance themselves from Olivia and me in subtle ways. They started to skip joint meetings or send updates through email instead of discussing things in person. When we did meet, the conversations were curt, and there was a noticeable tension in the air. The friendship that had once felt solid and reliable was fraying. What had begun as a shared financial venture was now driving a wedge between us, and it was becoming harder to separate the investment from the personal relationship we had built over the years. Despite the growing distance, the project continued to move forward. Construction on the homes progressed, albeit at a slower pace than initially anticipated. The developers assured us that the delays were minor and that the market would eventually recover. However, the competing development continued to overshadow ours in the market, which remained volatile. The uncertainty weighed heavily on all of us. But while I held on to the belief that things would improve, Noah's focus remained on minimizing the damage. As the market remained volatile, Noah's frustration grew. He became increasingly disillusioned with the project, and it became clear that he was preparing to make a move to withdraw. Regardless of the penalties involved, his mindset shifted from salvaging the investment to simply cutting his losses and getting out before things got worse. He was willing to take the hit, even if it meant jeopardizing the partnership we had built. Over time, the tension between our families became unavoidable. Project meetings felt more like confrontations with Noah and I, each entrenched in our respective positions. Olivia and Emma, while not directly involved in the financial decisions, were equally affected by the growing strain. What had once been casual social gatherings between friends had become uncomfortable and stilted. The ease with which we had once interacted was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of frustration and disappointment. As the project dragged on, it became increasingly clear that our joint investment was no longer just a financial issue. It had become a personal one as well. The cracks in our partnership were widening, and the longer we remained divided on how to proceed, the more irreparable the damage became. What had once been a promising venture was now the source of growing conflict, and the friendship that had once seemed so solid was unraveling before my eyes. Following a series of tense meetings, the final decision was made abruptly. The disagreement between Noah and me had escalated to a breaking point. The partnership, once built on trust and shared goals, was irreparably fractured. Noah had been pushing to withdraw from the project for weeks, citing his growing concerns about the market and the potential financial losses. I remained convinced that staying in the investment was the only logical course of action, but Noah's patience had run out after the last meeting, where we could no longer find common ground. Noah and Emma made the decision to officially withdraw from the project. This move triggered the penalty clause in our contract, leaving Olivia and me to deal with the financial consequences. The penalty was substantial, hitting both families hard, but the brunt of the financial strain now rested squarely on our shoulders. Without Noah and Emma's capital, we were left to cover the remaining costs of the investment, which far exceeded what we had initially planned for. The financial impact was immediate. The sudden loss of capital forced Olivia and me to take out loans to cover the project's expenses. The penalties for early withdrawal were steep, exacerbating our financial strain. The loans we took on came with high interest rates, further burdening our monthly finances. Our savings, once carefully built up over the years, were rapidly depleted as we struggled to keep up with the mounting costs. The project continued, with our financial resources stretched thin, and every new development felt like an added burden. The developers provided regular updates on the construction, but progress was slower than anticipated. The delays, coupled with the financial strain, left Olivia and me in a precarious position. Initially optimistic about the returns, we now faced an uncertain future. The prospect of recovering our losses seemed increasingly unlikely. Noah and Emma, having withdrawn from the project, had moved on with their lives. They bore the cost of their early withdrawal, which, although substantial, allowed them to retain a portion of their initial investment. From an external perspective, it seemed they had made a difficult yet necessary decision to safeguard their financial future. However, the repercussions of their withdrawal were profoundly felt by us. The partnership, which had once been a source of mutual support and shared objectives, had now become a source of resentment and bitterness. The social repercussions of the split were equally devastating. The once steadfast and dependable bond between our two families was effectively severed. Olivia and Emma, who had been close friends for years, struggled to maintain their friendship following the investment-related events. Our families ceased to gather for dinners, vacations, or casual get-togethers. Conversations, when they occurred, were brief and tense. The trust that had once existed between us was shattered, and it seemed there was no way to restore it. Following the split, Olivia and I dedicated ourselves to managing the financial strain. We consulted with financial advisors, evaluated our options, and took every measure to stabilize our situation. The loans we had taken out were a constant source of stress, compounded by the uncertainty surrounding the project. The real estate market remained unpredictable, with property values fluctuating and potential buyers hesitant to commit. Despite our best efforts, it became evident that the road ahead would be long and arduous. As the project progressed, the financial burden grew, necessitating significant lifestyle adjustments. Vacations were canceled, unnecessary purchases were postponed, and our focus shifted entirely to managing the costs associated with the investment. The reality of our situation was far from our initial expectations. Instead of financial freedom, we were now facing financial strain that threatened to undermine everything we had worked for. Consequently, Noah and Emma continued on with their lives, seemingly unaffected by the split. Having paid the penalty for their early withdrawal, they no longer had to contend with the ongoing challenges of the project. Their decision to exit had allowed them to avoid the long-term consequences that Olivia and I were now facing. They had salvaged a portion of their investment, and although the split had undoubtedly caused some financial strain on their end, they appeared to have recovered more quickly than we had. The partnership, once built on mutual trust and shared goals, was now a distant memory. The financial strain, coupled with the personal fallout from the split, left Olivia and me feeling isolated. We had once relied on Noah and Emma for support, both financially and personally, but now we were left to face the consequences on our own. The dream of financial independence that had once seemed so achievable now felt like a distant goal, overshadowed by the reality of the situation we found ourselves in. As time went on, we remained committed to seeing the project through. Despite the difficulties we faced, the real estate development continued. And while progress was slower than anticipated, there was still hope that the market would eventually recover. Olivia and I held on to the belief that if we could weather the storm, we might still come out on the other side with something to show for our efforts. However, the road ahead was uncertain, and the weight of the financial burden remained a constant presence in our lives. Ultimately, the division between our two families was not merely financial, but also personal. The partnership had been irrevocably severed, and the once bonding friendship was now lost. The initial promise of investing together had ultimately led to our separation, leaving behind only financial stress and a lingering sense of betrayal. As the months passed, the financial losses continued to accumulate. For Olivia and me, the market conditions remained unfavorable, and the real estate project we had invested in began to stall. What had once seemed like a promising opportunity was now becoming an increasingly burdensome failure. The developers faced delays, and interest in the properties dwindled. We were left struggling with mounting costs, and the loans we had taken out weighed heavily on our finances. There was no sign of the market rebounding, and it became clear that our investment was not going to yield the returns we had once expected. During this time, I began to focus more and more on the circumstances that had led us here. The decision Noah and Emma had made to withdraw from the project continued to linger in my mind as Olivia and I faced the harsh reality of our financial situation. I couldn't help but think about how things might have been different if they had stayed in. Their departure had forced us to shoulder the full burden of the investment, and I was left with the frustrating reality of dealing with the consequences alone. One day, I received an email from a mutual acquaintance. It contained information that fueled my growing resentment. According to the email, Noah and Emma had developed a competing real estate project located just a few miles away from ours. This new project had been one of the factors contributing to the downfall of our own investment. The news hit hard while we were dealing with the financial fallout of a stalled project. Noah and Emma had moved on to another investment, one that had drawn interest away from our original development and was potentially thriving. With this revelation in hand, I saw an opportunity to take action. I began to gather as much information as I could about the rival development that Noah and Emma had invested in through online research, market reports, and conversations with people in the real estate industry. I built a detailed picture of the project's vulnerabilities. It became clear that while it had initially garnered interest, the development was not without its own risks. There were factors such as zoning challenges, potential legal issues, and environmental concerns that had the potential to cause problems for the project. I decided to act on this information and devise a plan that would damage the success of their investment. The initial strategy involved exploiting my knowledge of the rival project's vulnerabilities. I began by anonymously reporting zoning violations and potential legal issues to local authorities. These reports, though not immediately harmful, began to impede the project's progress. As inspections and legal reviews were initiated, the delays caused by these disruptions added to the growing uncertainty around the project. At the same time, I leveraged my connections within the real estate industry to spread rumors about the instability of the rival development. I contacted real estate agents, developers, and potential buyers, suggesting that there were underlying issues with the project that would make it a risky investment. These rumors, while unsubstantiated, began to create doubt in the minds of potential buyers and investors. The market's response was predictable, with interest in the rival development waning as I continued my efforts to undermine it. I remained discreet, ensuring that my actions could not be traced back to me. I derived satisfaction from observing the escalating challenges faced by Noah and Emma's new investment. The project's progress slowed as delays mounted and buyers began to back out due to the uncertainty surrounding it. The rival development, which had once seemed like a safe bet for Noah and Emma, was now struggling to stay on track. The impact of my actions began to ripple through the market. The developers of the rival project had to contend with legal challenges, regulatory inspections, and a growing sense of doubt among potential buyers. As a result, property values in the area began to drop, further eroding the profitability of the project. Noah and Emma, who had once thought they had escaped the financial strain of our original investment, we now facing their own set of challenges. I continued to watch from the sidelines as the rival project faltered, the delays stretched on, and the development failed to meet its original deadlines. Buyers became more hesitant to commit, and the project's reputation began to suffer. The financial pressures on Noah and Emma became evident as their investment in a rival project began to falter. What had initially seemed like a new beginning for them was now turning into a costly mistake as the months passed. The damage to the rival project became more pronounced. Local media began to report on the delays and legal issues surrounding the development, further fueling the negative perception of the project. Noah and Emma, who had once appeared to have moved on successfully, were now dealing with the same kind of financial pressure that Olivia and I had been facing for so long. Eventually, the rival development reached a point where it could no longer continue as planned. The legal challenges, coupled with the loss of buyer interest and the declining property values, made it financially unviable for the developers to complete the project as originally envisioned. The development was put on hold indefinitely, leaving Noah and Emma's investment in limbo. The financial losses they incurred were substantial, and the project, once a source of hope for them, had become a liability. While Olivia and I continued to struggle with our financial difficulties, the realization that Noah and Emma were now facing similar challenges brought a sense of resolution. The rival project had faltered, just as ours had, and the consequences of their decision to invest elsewhere had caught up with them. The damage I had orchestrated had taken its toll, and the satisfaction of seeing their investment fail provided a sense of closure to the betrayal I had felt. Ultimately, both projects were left in ruin. The financial strain continued to affect all of us, but the rivalry and resentment that had developed between our families left lasting scars. The once close friendship had been replaced by a sense of bitterness and mistrust, and the damage done to our investments mirrored the damage done to our relationships. Financial gain had led to mutual destruction, and the fallout from the failed investments left behind nothing but the remnants of what had once been a shared dream.